one question I always had, and this is a genuine question, right? So if I'm totally wrong, please correct me. But as far as I understand, it was so dangerous for European purchasers of slaves in Africa to go ashore that almost the entirety of the slaves who were bought in Africa were sold by Africans. And that's always, to those people who are aware of that, which is actually not that many people, that's always kind of, to me, well, even if we were to pay, like, who should be, shouldn't be the people who sold and captured those slaves be paying reparations? Do you see what I'm getting at?
No, I don't. Actually.
You don't?
This is again a terrible argument.
No, I'm just genuinely asking. I don't know what the right
because
answer
there
is.
were Jewish collaborators in the Holocaust. Does that mean that we should blame Jewish people? Like, it's a silly argument.
No, hold on.
It's 100% the same.
No, no,
we're going to say no. We should go claim the Jewish people.
But that's not a fair comparison. If the Holocaust had been conducted by the Jews, that would be a very different conversation.
But slavery wasn't conducted by Africans.
They sold all the slaves, so it was.
They kept slaves themselves.
Of people. Well, no. Again, there's a huge difference between
still slavery.
So-called. No, it's not. No. I think if we have definitions, it's really, really important. Okay. What Europe did was a new thing. It was not.
Wasn't.
Yes, it was. No. Chattel slavery.
I'm sorry. In the Islamic slave trade, they were involved in mining, in agriculture, in irrigation.
But they also, in the Islamic slave trade, they also had rights and could
You're
be free.
lying to the public, though. They were on royal plantations.
Bilal, the person who does the first call for prayer in the Quran, is an enslaved African. They had rights. You could become free. And in African slavery, in terms of what you're talking about, what was actually just said was African slavery was much more like serfdom, where you were part of the family, you had freedom at a certain time. It's actually much more comparable to serfdom than it is to chattel slavery. Chattel slavery is dehumanizing. It is literally the taking away of every single right. And it's quite likely that the people who sold, who didn't actually know what they were doing. Because remember, African slavery doesn't actually take place mostly on the continent. They'd go far away.
You're ignoring all the slaves who died being kidnapped and transported to the coast, right?
Again, the point here is, of course there is. And there was huge rebellions. So yes, there were some Africans, 100%, who were complicit. There were whole kingdoms that essentially grew out of the idea of we will trade enslaved people. But this was because of the conditions that were imposed, right? I'm not saying they're not blameless. You're not hearing me say they're blameless. But again, if you look at the calculations for reparations, they are based largely not on harm. They are based largely on paid labor and the wealth gap. Yes, you can find the minimum. I mean, they were very, like, in terms of the population of Africa, how many were involved in trading people? That is a minuscule number. That is not thousands. That is a minuscule number. So the actual impact of slavery in Africa was to impoverish Africa.